I can wake up to the God that has never left my side and that is in my head and in my heart, and I can overflow with the peace He gives, live with the joy that He gives, recognize that He is with me and never leaving, and ultimately recognize I live with joy because I know the end of this story. I know where I'm going. I know how this all plays out in the very end. And that ultimate outcome is what makes the difference in how we live every day. Hi, I'm Katherine from Hope Heals Ministries, and I am a speaker, an author, and an advocate, and specifically for the disabled community. And in short, I had a massive brainstem stroke 12 years ago and very nearly died, and subsequently became a person living with extreme disabilities. And in those 12 years, I have recovered incredibly beyond anyone's imaginings. However, I still have major deficits, including that I cannot drive a car, I cannot walk on my own, and I have a hand that doesn't work, and a number of big issues, and yet I have so much hope. And perhaps one of the very coolest parts of my story is that I had one child at the time of my stroke, a 6-month-old baby, who's now doing great. He's 12 years old, and James is thriving. And I have another son now, John, who's 4 years old and is also thriving, and they are just the joys of my life. So I have 2 sons and a husband, Jay, and live in Atlanta, Georgia. What we have tried to do as parents, not just throughout this time, but really throughout the lives of our children, is to narrate and teach them that life is both good and hard at the same time, and that those are not mutually exclusive things, that in fact they actually coexist in the Christian life. So this honestly has been a great tool in this season that is hard in many ways. I mean, to these kids, not going to school is very hard, and we think perspective is important. We're not minimizing what they're going through, but we are teaching them that life is good and hard, and the Christian life is that way. We're not exempt from it because Christ is in our story. We live in a fallen world where terrible things happen, but we can take heart, we can be of good cheer because we do ultimately know the end of the story. So our prayer for our boys has been and will continue to be that no matter if tomorrow is the best or worst or last day of their lives, that God will give them courage and bravery to live it well to His glory, and that they will embrace both the hard things and the good things. I see God so at work in the season that we are in. Perhaps when there is desperation of all kinds, there is an awakening to God that happens. Perhaps with the limitations we find ourselves in, stuck at home and scared of the future and fearful of what could happen to our lives and our health and all the things I've seen in my story, that actually through the limitations there is flourishing available. And that is such a beautiful thought for all of us in this moment, that the places we feel the most constrained in our stories, that we are so limited, those are actually the places that can become my avenues to freedom. Take my very tangible wheelchair. It's viewed by many, some, as something that confines me. You've heard that before, bound or confined to a wheelchair. But I believe, and I see all over my story, that the wheelchair is actually the avenue to my freedom. That the wheelchair enables me to go where I want to go and do what I want to do. So it's not confining me, it's actually freeing me. And you know how I got there? I thought about it. That's what we have to do in these difficult times. Look at what remains and ponder, what is God doing in our story, and recognizing, oh, this is not the obvious, clear way I go, but maybe this way can be a really incredible way. And there's a lot there. And for some reason, God has assigned that way to my life. So I'm going to live it well. My health journey has been extremely difficult in the last 12 years. I've had multiple surgeries, actually 11 surgeries, and many just sad setbacks in my recovery. I even dramatically broke my right leg, which I'd spent years relearning to walk on, and have had just a number of really bad falls and just some hard suffering. And perhaps a lot of that is so important in this season for me to remember what God was doing in me in that time, and to know that God will do it again. He continues to deliver us from very hard things and shows up in the midst of our dark suffering and seasons that are sad and hard and where we feel so alone and so trapped. I love the thought that we can live with joy in all of our really hard stories and be about disrupting this myth that joy comes only when it's pain-free, and really defy the full-on obsession that we all have with pain-free living. For me in my story, and I'm talking years later in my story, this wasn't the next day after waking up to a whole new life, I was able to recognize that I get to choose to live with joy in my story based on who I know Jesus to be and how he has always shown up and taken care of me. That I, even in the midst of an uncertain situation, can recognize and train my mind to take captive thoughts that are the opposite. But I can recognize and live with joy in what God is doing. I want to share a passage from Jesus Calling on October 14th that I pray will encourage you today. Be prepared to suffer for me in my name. All suffering has meaning in my kingdom. Pain and problems are opportunities to demonstrate your trust in me. Bearing your circumstances bravely, even thanking me for them, this is one of the highest forms of praise. This sacrifice of thanksgiving rings golden toned bells of joy throughout heavenly realms. On earth also, your patient suffering sends our ripples of good tidings in ever-widening circles. When suffering strikes, remember that I am sovereign and that I can bring good out of everything. Do not try to run from pain or hide from problems. Instead, accept adversity in my name, offering it up to me for my purposes. Thus, your suffering gains meaning and draws you closer to me. Joy emerges from the ashes of adversity through your trust and thankfulness.